Hello and welcome to Tinto Yaps, that time of the week where I have a look at all of the things that Tinto Talks has been talking about in the comment section of the various dev diaries that we've had this week. So, of course, we're going to start off with the Mamluk Barracks because we recently learned all about slavery and how slave goods are now going to be a thing. So we see it needs zero point 0.3 slave goods in this particular building and it produces a bit of monthly manpower. It's not only going to be the Mamluks that can build this, like Johan says here, a building that only some countries can build. I wonder if it is going to be something that is localized. For example, the Ottomans being able to build the Janissary barracks, but instead of having two separate buildings, it's just, slave barracks with slave being localized. Is my guess. I don't know, but that would be my guess. There was also the thread that I brought you on, I think I made a video on Tuesday or Monday, that got a few more comments. This one about please make sure the game is finished at release. There's a few more comments that I want to bring to your attention. Firstly, no countries will have country-specific mission trees at release. I brought you this comment already, but I just want to, there's a few more things to it, and I want to kind of go over it again. This was very surprising to me when I first read it. I was very curious about it, and I kind of want to get everyone's thoughts on how they feel about it, because I know mission trees are something that people either love, hate, or are ambivalent towards. Okay, that there are people with very strong feelings about mission trees. Some people think that the game really doesn't work without them. Many people who play Anbana, for example, that mod is not really complete without mission trees. Mission trees really add everything to that mod. But then there are, I guess we could call them EU4 purists who really hate mission trees, and they think that it takes away from the freedom and the sandbox of a campaign in EU4. Here, we do know for a fact that this game will have mission trees, and we know for a fact that they are an evolution of the Imperator style system, where you have, let's say, a book that can open into multiple separate dynamic mission trees. I think the Imperator system works really well. I was surprised, though, that there is not going to be any country-specific missions available. I do think that's where they're going to be going for DLC, though. I think mission trees work quite well as DLC, flavor DLC, in that way that it's not absolutely necessary to grab every single DLC. Like, if there is a DLC that comes out that has a mission tree for random country in the world, the Mamluks, and you have really no interest in playing the Mamluks, well, then you don't need to pick up that DLC. I do think that is the way that they're going to be going for the post-release support, and I'm sure people will have a problem with it, because there are always people who have problems with post-release monetization. So we'll see. We'll have to see how it plays out. Father Loris here asking if there is a mission tree for the 100 Years' War. Is it going to be something that feels unique to France and England? Johan saying, why would you need a mission tree for the 100 Years' War? It's rather fleshed out in a situation. Okay. He comes back. Maybe the 100 Years' War is a bad example. Say there's some flavor that would fit into a mission tree rather than a situation, maybe a mission for Russia's expansion into Siberia or something, or Sweden's expansion into the Baltic. How specific would that content be to Russia or Sweden? He's saying there that it's normal gameplay with various narratives that are emerging. It's kind of hard to get the answers, right? I feel like what Father Horse is asking is, how specific are the mission trees that are in the game, right? If there's no country-specific ones, maybe, if we look at the Russian area, there's Muscovy and Yaroslavl and Rostov and all of these, Smolensk, and all of these different Russian principalities. So saying that there is a mission tree specifically for a country would be wrong, unless you consider, when they form Russia, then they get the mission tree, which I guess is a country-specific mission tree. But maybe they don't need to form Russia to do these kinds of things, I think is what Father Loris is asking here. But yeah, apparently that is also not a mission tree. That's just emergent gameplay. I remember you said you already designed mechanics for a lot of religions, but do you plan on keep expanding that before release? So basically talking about the animism that got split into all of the various things. The variants of animism will not have any unique content except for some different values, which I think is fine. No one was expecting absolutely fleshed out individual religions for countries that are, let's be honest, not really present in a way that is anything other than to be conquered and converted. There was quite a few religions with only like a single country there, and I'm sure that there will be some people that will be like, I'm going to take this individual nation, and but to flesh out mechanics on those individual religions to the level of, say, a Catholic is just not really feasible. There are far too many of them. But, having them get anything unique, like different values or what have you, is perfectly fine in my idea, in my head. Different regions should require different strategies based on different geography and starting positions of those regions. This is basically my argument against lucky nations. It feels like Britain should play different from Russia because one is a thalassocratic colonizer and the other is a land-based. I mean, they are also a colonizer, so I don't know why you didn't just put that there. But yeah, they will obviously play different based on starting situation. Mission tree isn't necessary. They play different in EU4 with, ignoring the mission trees as well. So, I mean, that's just kind of obvious. Deterministic gimmicks such as if you play Russia, you can magically spawn dozens of Streltsy, like government points. Yeah, I feel like that's... I do like these kinds of mechanics. I think they do fit, and I do enjoy them. But they are more gamey than the kind of realism that it looks like EU5 is aiming for. You definitely notice how different some similar-sized countries like Norway, Aragon, Portugal, Serbia, and Ottomans play, even without any flavor content, just because of geography, resources, pops, climate, neighbors, religions, etc. This is awesome to see for sure. I think that is what everyone's pretty happy about. But anyway, I just wanted to bring in the end of this thread that, there was some extra stuff in there that I didn't manage to get to. Yeah, there you go. And now we're going to move on to slavery because... Yep, it's just a topic that needs covering. But anyway, let's move on to the comments in the Slavery Dev Diary. I'm surprised you decided to tackle the issue. I thought it was a no-no. I've seen this a lot. Johan saying here, we're making a game simulating history. It's part of it, and this is what I actually made on the thumbnail of the Slavery Dev Diary because it is such a brilliant quote. And yeah. I mean, Victoria 3 also has slavery in it, and that game is, I'm not going to say bad, because that's obvious. I'm going to say that Victoria 3 takes some liberties with historical accuracy to make it seem better than it was, let's say. The whole idea of multiculturalism being a law that can be passed and it instantly makes every single pop in your nation completely accepting no racism is outlawed and therefore it doesn't exist anymore is basically how Victoria 3 works. I know they've got a racism DLC coming up soon, so maybe that's going to change, but like even that game, who honestly whitewashes history to a fair degree, has slavery and it's abhorrent. So yeah, EU5 is going to be way more realistic, it seems, than Victoria 3. So of course it is going to have slavery. It's going to cover slavery, and it's going to cover all aspects of slavery. Not just the triangle trade, not just the Barbary pirates. It's also got the Mongols. It's also got the Arabian slave trade. It's got it all, and I think that is fantastic. Isn't the word, but it is appropriate. It is correct to do so, and yeah, it is history, and a lot of history is kind of dark and awful. So, does that mean it shouldn't be in? Should warfare not be in because it's dark and all? Okay, I just kind of had another dig at Victoria 3 there, but you know what I mean, right? It should be there because it happened. And this game is about things that happened. So, yeah, no, makes sense. I just thought, fantastic quotes. That's why I put it at the start of this little section. But anyway, moving on. Interesting diversity to simulate the way slaves were obtained. Will there be a distinction between societies where slavery was hereditary and where slavery wasn't? No, not really. Slaves in the Aztec Empire did not inherit their status, for example. So they're not simulating the societies where slaves were castrated either. And I think, if I recall correctly, and feel free to correct me if I am wrong, this is the way that the Arabian slave trade worked for the majority of history. Basically, the taking slaves from the Horn of Africa, bringing them to Arabia, and then castrating them so they didn't have children, and therefore that is why the population of African descent in Arabia is quite small compared to, for example, the USA, because USA was horrific with their chattel slavery system, but they also didn't castrate their slaves, so there's that kind of descendancy difference. But that's not being simulated. We'll see later that basically all of the slave pops, they don't really grow in number, they don't really shrink in number, they just kind of stay stagnant. They just, they don't grow, they don't shrink, they stay stagnant. I don't know if I need to really elaborate on that one. Would slaves be part of an estate? They have zero political power, but they default to commoners, not that it matters. Fair enough. Will Project Caesar represent the fact that slaves participate in the administration of certain regions? Yes, they can be working in special buildings for administration, yes. And you cannot enslave the same culture pops. I'm sure there are some examples of this happening, which is why this got a few dislikes, but on the whole, I think this is fine to have as a game mechanic, and it'll prevent more weird stuff than it allows, it'll prevent more weird stuff from happening, so that I think that is probably a good idea. Let's say I'm American and those Berbers have taken a lot of my people as slaves. Is there a way to keep track of slaves that are part of your primary or accepted culture? Yes, if they do keep their culture and religion. Can I start a war to liberate all of the same culture or same culture group or same religion slaves and bring them back to my own country? You can conquer the territory, but yeah, a peace treaty to get all the slaves of your primary culture back home would be a good idea to have. Let's add it. I love this. Bro, interesting name. Bro makes a suggestion. Suggestion is good. Suggestion gets added. I feel like this is just another example of why these Tinto Talks exist, and why, if you are not on the Paradox forums with your ideas, then you should be, because sometimes this stuff happens, and I love this. I absolutely love seeing this kind of thing. Can countries from Europe reintroduce slavery? No. In Russia, the slaves were serfs until 1723, so in this case, it will be the same mechanics of sale and trade. It will be only population character. So serfs are not slaves, according to the game. They are peasants with severe limits. Okie dokie. Will slave populations in some areas grow in size significantly over time on their own, like the colonies that will become the US South, while constantly decreasing and needing new slaves to be brought over in other areas in order to maintain size, like Haiti? Slaves don't grow on their own. They maintain their levels at best, and you see a lot of people that disagree with this. There you go. This is what I was saying earlier. I'm willing to wait and see on this one, because I do think it would be wise. It would be more realistic to have the differences. The Arabian slave trade should require constant influx of new slaves to keep their levels. The slaves in the American South probably should grow over time. Slowly, of course, but they should still grow because they weren't prevented from having children. And I'm pretty sure in the American South, the children born to slaves were automatically slaves, whereas that wasn't the case in, for example, the Aztec Empire. So I definitely think some differences there could be added. If I understand the slave market correctly, you need slaves to make slaves. Also, if it creates pops out of thin air, that's not how it works, is there then a way to make the population boom with that by buying slaves to free in your land but not stopping foreign slavery? It takes other pops and makes them into slaves. So it'll turn your clergy, your burghers, your peasants into slaves to make those numbers. So Sometimes you might not want that. Sometimes you do. Who knows? Will indentured peasants also be represented as slaves? No, those are serfs. Most European countries didn't officially allow for slavery before the discovery of America. Will this be represented? Yes. Is a law, children of slaves become free in the game? No. Can an attempt at abolition trigger a civil war? It's kind of out of the time frame. Will abolition be instantaneous? Yes. If you don't practice slavery, will you free all the slaves upon getting some in your lands? Yes. Will a division between slave and free state be able to be implemented? I guess this is literally talking about the American state system where you had a slave state and you had a free state. Maybe he's asking if, I can prevent slaves from going into this area or this province and then have this province be, happy with slavery. I guess that's all about building the correct buildings in those areas, potentially. Can slaves start a slave revolt? If yes, what happens when they win? No more slavery. Makes sense, I guess. Slave economies were ultimately not very competitive nor productive, especially once industrialization showed up. Will this lower output be represented? Before industrialization, slavery was not exactly non-competitive. I guess just later on, when industrialization has come into effect, then you will be able to build buildings that make goods at a higher pace or a higher amount, frequency, whatever, than the slave-producing plantation buildings, is what I would guess. It's kind of weird that the African slaves are represented by an icon of two white people, but having the slaves be only the pups that are black be even worse. Do you think about having the pups icons be different depending on their ethnicity? We talked about this, and one day they will have ethnic differences on pop-type icons. I think that's fine. I do agree that this is weird. I do agree that this is worse. But yes, this is the best case scenario, and hopefully we get that before too long. That would be kind of cool. Kind of neat. Does getting slave raided give a casus belli on the raider? You can create it if they got privateers in your nodes, and this kind of explains a little bit more about the casus belli system, because just being privateered doesn't give you a CB. You can't declare war instantly with that. You need to also have the spy network and then create CB using the spy network because of the privateers is going to be an option. So that is certainly a system that is different from EU4 for sure. Is there something stopping early game Christian nations from building slave markets? There are a few laws in the game that limit slavery. So, yep, that's good. That makes sense. I hope slave raids and capturing slaves from sacked cities will be near ubiquitous in sub-Saharan Africa. It is very common there indeed. Fair enough. Hordes should definitely have some sort of non-war raid mechanic for acquiring slaves like the Berbers and not just limited to sieges. They had a mechanic similar to it, but it was not very good and it was very micro-intensive. I feel like basically what this guy is describing is the CK version of, the raiding system. That is kind of micro, for sure, but at the same time, I kind of still want it. I do want to see hostility while not at war in some capacity, because it just makes sense. I would like to, say if I'm being privateered, my boats should be able to kill their boats if I set them to, a mission of protecting my coasts. Hostility while not at war was so common. And usually that was the way that wars started. So I would like to see something like that added. I don't know if this was the mechanic they had similar to it, but that's just a suggestion that I'm throwing out there right now. Human sacrifices by the Aztecs are represented extremely based. I'm not sure if I agree with it being extremely based, but you never know. There is a reason why so many of the other states in Mexico went, oh, let's ally with these weird Spanish invaders no matter what. Yeah, the enemy of my enemy is a friend is it's pretty common. Mechanics seem pretty deep overall. I'm impressed. I'm glad that all slavery is getting covered, from Mongols to galley slaves to Native American slavery. EU5 will teach us that all of our ancestors were just awful, awful people and made a tidy profit out of it. And Johan's saying here, if there's one thing that close to 30 years of making historical games have taught me, it's that humans all over the world are all the same for both good and for evil. I agree with this very much. Maybe that's just yeah, I mean, it is just the case. The historically subjugated, in a lot of cases, I'm not saying every single case, but a lot of cases, if they had the power over their oppressors, they would be the oppressors. Um, Maybe that's a hot take, a hot historical take, a cancelable take, but it's a take that I'm pretty confident in. Um, yeah, population, put enough, individual people can be good or evil, but put enough people in the same area, then, it's amplified, let's say. But let's move on before I get cancelled. Let's go. Do you get some sort of malus for using slaves in your army? Sure, you should get a debuff to discipline. Nope, a soldier is a soldier. Technically, the Mamluks were a society relying entirely on a slave-soldier caste. I mean, the Janissaries in EU4 had a discipline as one of their bonuses, right? This is... They were slave soldiers as well, so... Yeah, sure, makes sense. Can you go full Victoria 3? Never go full Victoria 3. I mean, you don't know. And emancipate slaves in locations that you own. If so, what happens to the buildings? This is something that I had asked. Do they switch from slave input to population input, or do they have disabled and or destroyed, and do you need to build them from the ground up? If you can't have slaves in a location due to laws, then they become peasants, and their buildings are useless. I think then that we need a little bit of clarification on what happens when we destroy a building. Can we convert a building? I would very, very much like to see the ability to convert buildings. Convert plantation into, I don't know, non-slave farm thing. Nailed that building name. Something like that would be really cool, I think, and should be probably added to the game, if it isn't already. And then finally for this Dev Diary, in the final version, will all portraits of European-looking people, or will there be different portraits for pops? For pop types, perhaps, already went over that. And for characters, there are lots and lots of variants, which we kind of already knew. And yeah, that is the Dev Diary on slavery. Now let's have a look at some of the comments on the Dev Diary about the Japanese shogunate, because there were some very, very interesting comments that we saw here. So starting off, are we seeing all of Southeast Asia next week, including the Philippines and all of Indonesia? Only the mainland, so Ayutthaya, basically, down there. Maybe down to Singapore area, because that technically is the mainland. Big old peninsula. And then the rest will be on another Tinto maps. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think what we're going to get is Southeast Asia mainland, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Australia and New Zealand, then the Pacific Islands, so 4 Dev Diaries, and then I think we're going to America. I think in about a month's time we're going to be going to the Americas, then spending a little time there. I don't know what the breakdown there is going to be. And then we know that in January time we're going to start getting flavor Dev Diaries, and that would line up pretty nicely with the end of the Tinto maps. So that's basically my thoughts on what we're getting in the coming weeks. But yeah, moving on. Japan should be an international organization with many daimyos, shogun, imperial court, etc. It is. There is an IO. We'll see that in a moment. I'm surprised this wasn't answered here, but it looks really looking very bland. Sure, okay. Currently, no matter what might be hidden inside. Literally, I see this a lot, especially with regards to Africa. When you look at an image of Africa on the map, it looks kind of empty compared to even EU4. But hidden underneath the map layer is the map layer of the Societies of Pops, the culture map, which really fill it up quite significantly. So, it is what it is. I think maybe a combined map might be something that people enjoy. I would prefer daimyos to be land-based. Okay, so what? Or army-based countries, because daimyos owned land. Not in 1337. The daimyo will get ways of getting to own the land and turn into normal landed tags. Cool. I think that's really fun gameplay. I think that's fantastic gameplay. Being able to start as this building-based country, one of 146, and then becoming landed and then taking the shogunate. I think that's awesome. I think that's really fun, or it has the potential to be really fun gameplay. And I'm very interested in doing a multiplayer game with all of those, well, not all, but a lot of those land-based, or building-based countries filled out. That seems really fun to me. Any IOs? The shogunate itself is an IO with all the clans in it. Fantastic. Great job. Thanks for the work you've done so far, Roger, because obviously Pavia is away until next week. We know that the other islands of the Ryukyu archipelago had other similarly developed kingdoms, even though we know nothing about them. I think it'd be fair to represent them with Society of Pops. Could be an option. Is there any event for the establishment of Joseon? If yes, it is considered a different tag from Goryeo, or is it the same tag with a different flavor name? It is, and it would be the same tag with a different name. Cool. Can you make the name of Japan more dynamic? It is fully dynamic. It will already change to the Ashikaga Shogunate once that starts breaking apart. Do Japan and Korea have slaves at game start? No, but the minorities in Japan haven't been done yet. And I recently found out, and by recently I mean today, and it was via a comedy YouTube short. I don't know how true this is, but it looked like they looked up Wikipedia or Google or something. That Korea had the longest unbroken period of time as a slave-owning society of about 1,500 years. So probably, if that is true, and maybe I should have looked it up before I started talking about it, maybe Korea probably should have some slaves in 1337. Maybe that's going to be coming yet. And why are the Izu Islands not considered locations? Unfortunately, they are too small. Moving on. How many locations in total in Japan? Around 400. That is insane. That's huge. Compare that to EU4, which has around 50 provinces. Yeah, 8 times more. I love that. I think that's fantastic. More granularity is more good, in my opinion. Playing as the shogunate, is it impossible to work against the fragmentation of the country? Can the shogun use warfare and diplomacy to weaken the clans and strengthen the central government, etc.? The plan is that there will be a way to avoid or limit the explosion of your country. Yes, cool. I like that a lot. I think both playing as Japan and playing as Shimazu, the individual clans, will be very fun. Disappointed you've chosen to go the same route as EU4 and create an entirely fictional cultural divide in Japan. Yeah, this is the kind of... Every Tinto maps generally has this same argument. How granular do you want culture? How split up do you want the culture? And I do find it interesting that this is the opposite of my own complaint about England. I think England should be multiple cultures. And I don't know much about Japan, the culture in this period. I just don't. So I don't know if this is correct or if it is not. But I do think it is understandable that, I mean, people saying here, if English qualifies as one culture, surely Japanese does as well. I don't think English qualifies as one culture, so maybe I should be fine with Japan qualifying as 3, or however many it is. I think it's 3. It's so that there is some gameplay differences between the clans. Also, considering that there have always been regional differences there, so have there been in England. There just is, even today. For example, with the clans of Tohoku or Kyushu being considered as different as the ones in central Japan. Bloody Southerners, different from glorious-based Northerners in England. That's just a fact. It's just a fact. It is what it is. I think there is not much of, in a way of, like, a unified thought on what cultures should be split up. Maybe it's because different developers are working on different regions. That could totally be the case. I would hope that England gets... I mean, I'm not going to talk about England in this. I've talked about it enough. But yeah. Yeah. Dude is disappointed. This is the reason. Moving on. I'm interested in what the thought process was behind not giving any land to the clans and keeping it all under the shogun. Did they historically have no control over the land and taxes by 1337? And I have to be the guy to ask, why does Hokkaido have so many locations? By 1876, they had 58,000 people, and it seems the population wasn't any higher in the prior centuries. So, by 1337, the daimyo were the shugo daimyo, meaning that the shogun appointed them to the territory. It is not until a bit later that they transition into Sengoku daimyo, when they start getting more autonomy and authority over their own land, regardless of what the shogun wanted. That's why they're represented as extraterritorial countries at the start, but will turn into normal countries during the Sengoku. I think, again, I'm totally fine with this. I think this is going to be really good for gameplay, for sure. Is Sengoku Jidai inevitable? Or can a clever player avoid the disaster and properly unite the islands relatively peacefully as the shogunate? There will be tools for the shogunate to limit its effect. Not avoid completely, but just limit the effect. Yeah, that's good. I think that's fine. What's the name of the Ryukyuan religion? It is Yutaki. Can you restore imperial control as either of the courts? Will that also rename the Japan tag in the Japanese Empire? The name is completely dynamic, and there should be a path for that. And here's where I'm like, what do you mean as either of the courts? Are we talking about the northern and southern courts? Can you play as the southern court? Is that more of an alliance and a mechanic? This is what I thought. I thought it was just an alliance or an IO maybe or whatever. No, it's a tag. It's a fucking tag. Northern and southern court is a tag. These are all of the extraterritorial land-based countries, plus a couple more because they're underneath some of these. And then you also get the northern and southern courts. You also get to play as these. And you get to play as the two administrative clans as well. The green and the red are the administrative ones. So there's like 148, I think, tags that you can play on this island. That's insane. That's awesome. That's so cool. I think Japan is going to be a phenomenal place to play this game. They weren't really on my radar as one of the first places that I wanted to play. They kind of are now. They're really getting up there. They're really getting up there. Not directly related to Japan and Korea, but would you say that Project C's is the most flexible, scriptable, and moddable game Paradox has made so far? Roger here saying the flexibility of the script is certainly astonishing, as almost anything can be done with just script. Awesome. I will point out that a lot of things related to the UI will not be moddable if you want to still earn achievements in the game. We know that already, but this is fantastic from a mod fan perspective, which I definitely am, and I really can't wait for especially Anbana to get their hands on EU5 and just go ham. It's going to be so fun. And then finally, the final comment that I have for you today. Does each clan have a historical character, or do most famous clans have historical leaders and relatives? Not all of them have them yet, but the plan is to put as much historical characters as possible. Cool. Love that. Obviously, the character system is still controversial. I think the controversy around it has died down merely because it hasn't been mentioned a lot recently. But I am happy with it for... the visuals are still something I'm a little iffy on, but the characters in general, I'm totally fine with them existing. It's cool. So yeah, that is the Japan and Korea Tinto talk yap session. And yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think. Anything in this video that you thought was particularly, oh wow, that was crazy, or I'd hate that, or oh, I love that. Just let me know in the comment section below, because it really does help me out if I get comments, and I read them, because I enjoy them. Also, if you want to help me out even further, hit the subscribe button. That is definitely would help me out. Love that. And likes as well. And I will see you guys on Wednesday, where we're going to be talking about something that I've completely forgotten, that I'm going to go and have a look, because I would like to remember what it is that we're talking about. Great powers and hegemonies. There we go. I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.